Welcome to the Live It Right podcast, hosted by John and Caitlin Lindsay. We're going to be talking all things health and wellness, from food, fitness, relationships. So if you want to live your best life and live it right, join us for this conversation.
So whether you're a health enthusiast, a busy professional, or someone looking to achieve a more fulfilling life, you're in the right place. Tune in, subscribe, and join our community as we explore the path to living it right.
Let's go.
All right, welcome back to the Live It Right podcast. We are on episode 3, and today we're going to do a little interview style where I am going to interview John about how to start a mobility journey.
Awesome.
So we're going to go ahead and dive right in, all right?
Let's go.
All right, let's go. So, how do we start?
Simple answer is just start. Have a tiny bit of a plan and start. I think a lot of people, when they're thinking about mobility, they want like this grandiose plan, and that's great. If you can afford an in-person mobility coach, that would be the main route I would take. If you can afford an online coach, take that. If you can subscribe to like a low-cost app, do that. But on the low end of the spectrum, if you can just find 3, 4, maybe 5 drills that you know how to do well, and you know they hit points in your body that are struggle points, consistently do those drills 3 days a week, few sets, maybe 3 sets for however many reps are appropriate for each drill. Do that 3 days a week, maybe 20 minutes for 6 to 8 weeks. You are going to see some big change. What most people struggle with is that consistent practice. You know, they're not going to stick to the same 3 to 5 drills 3 days a week. They want to mix it up. And I get that, but your body needs the same stimulus to get the change. And another thing about mobility drills is there's this subtle nuance to them. They're kind of complicated. Like, it's going to take you, as you know, you're not going to master a mobility drill in one session, 2 sessions, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks is probably the minimum you should be doing a set of drills before you advance that drill or start to introduce other things. So
if you have no patience, either find patience, or mobility might not be the greatest thing for you right away. But I will say, to really harp on what he said about picking 3 to 4 drills, I think that was one of the things that I was most confused or had no understanding of, is the true dedication you have to certain movements that build and progress to reach that goal, that said goal. But it is not it's not biceps, triceps type thing. It is literally honing in on very, very minute exercises that build on one another.
Yeah, I mean, you get out, just like strength work, like endurance work, you get out what you put into the session. Mm-hmm. So if you're limited to 20 minutes, and you have 20 full minutes, execute within that 20 minutes the drills to absolute perfection. And that's going to take, if you're watching someone on an app or YouTube, that's going to take probably watching that video every time for the first 7-8 sessions to really understand and know you're doing it correctly. Because chances are, if you're starting a mobility journey, you probably don't move very well, or you got hurt and you need to correct something. And so chances are you might see myself demoing a drill or some other mobility practitioner, and you're not filming yourself or you're not utilizing a mirror or anything. You're like, oh yeah, I just did that hip rotation he just showed. But then you only watch the video once, and then you do that same way you've done it the first time for the entire 6 to 8 weeks, and you missed a big chunk of how to execute it correctly, and you weren't videotaping yourself, or you didn't have a coach there watching you. And I wouldn't say you wasted 6 to 8 weeks, but if you nailed down those subtle, nuanced things early on, you're just going to reap so much benefit out of the mobility drills. I mean, I would like to think I have pretty good mobility, and I can still do basic drills that I give my students, and I know how to manipulate them and get into my end range and still get a ton of value out of the most basic stuff. So So we're saying, how do we start a mobility journey? It's just start, have a little bit of a plan, and be consistent and pay attention to those tiny details.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, because I know a lot of people, I believe you still get a lot of questions of, or at least he did when he first started, he was like, I see that you're dedicating hours and hours and hours and hours and hours a week. I don't have that. So what you're basically saying is, even if you can dedicate 20 to 30 minutes a day, it's consistency. It may take you longer, but you can still reach those goals. It's more about the dedication to the progress and to the actual journey. You do not have to be someone who practices 4 hours a day to reach these goals, but those people are probably going to get there a little bit faster.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of talked about this in episode 1 of this podcast. This is kind of how I started. I was taking 20-minute blocks out of my day to just work on various parts of the body. And I kind of I got pretty good at it. And I got this mobility bug. And that's why I took it further, started doing these higher level positions. Because I just found it cool that you were able to manipulate the body and make progress like that. But
I think, my, what I just said, I think actually kind of takes me into my second question for you is, so you're not doing mobility work every day. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I do not. Well, I kind of have a daily routine that I guess it's not a daily routine anymore because I don't do it every day. But if anyone's
you built that base though.
Yeah,
you did it daily for a very long time.
One of the biggest influences on my mobility practice was functional range conditioning. They've created just a bunch of techniques and ways to manipulate the body. If you've worked with me as a student, we utilize a lot of their techniques, and they have a daily routine. If you just watch someone do it without them telling you about it, it just looks like they're rotating all the major joints in their body, 3 to 5 rotations. And that's what it is. But within that, there's these subtle nuances that you get a lot out of it. So I probably still do that routine at least on days I strength train, which is at least 3 days a week. I probably end up doing it 4 days a week. And it takes, now that I have it so programmed, it takes me like 6 or 7 minutes. I think it's a great warm up for any movement you're going to do, whether it's, regardless if it's mobility, strength, aerobic, it's just a nice thing to do. But no, I do that. I will do a middle split, a back bridge, and a front split session. But I don't even do those on a weekly basis. I will do back bridge every week, and I'll pair it with either middle split or front split. So I don't train the splits, but every other week essentially. And it's because I've built the capacity to do that, but it's also for those two movements, middle split and front split, I'm training so hard in that session. I need that week to recover. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing people miss. If you're new to mobility, this might be irrelevant to you, but if you get really into mobility and you're training it hard, your body's going to be sore. You're creating a unique stimulus to it. Just like when you get sore when you do a new type of strength work, you're going to leave that session sore, and you need a couple days to recover to get back to it. If you get to that point in your mobility journey, that means you're making progress, because your body, you broke down your body and it's going to build back up. So you deserve a rest day. Well,
and I think the other piece of it that you mentioned, but I think does go outside of the mobility realm, is, you're going to need recovery when you're pushing your body, when it's learning new things. But I remember it's baseline drills in basketball that you have to master the basics. But once you master the basics, you don't have to do them every single day.
Yeah,
and you build on them, and you become, you expand in other ways. It's, to me, this is, taking the sports I took part in, but equating them to mobility. But even if, it really is. But you say you don't do mobility every day, but I will actually push back on you because you do.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's be honest. If you follow John, you've probably seen him chill in a squat.
Okay.
So what's the deal with chilling in a squat 5 minutes a day?
That's a great point. Definitely don't do structured mobility every day, mm-hmm. but over the years, I have made it a point to sneak in using my mobility during the day. So one of my favorite, I'll get to a squat in a second, but mm-hmm. my favorite way to get on and off the floor is through a Cossack squat. If you don't know what a Cossack squat is, it's essentially like a lateral lunge, but you're squatting all the way ass to grass to the floor. Mm-hmm. I bet I do that no less than 5 to 6 times every single day. And that's just an incredible way, once you have the mobility, to, utilize it, grease the groove, as they say, and touch on it just enough. So you're going to continue to have it. I'm a big fan of getting on the floor in general, like working on the floor, sitting in a straddle, sitting in a 90-90. Any position that's just a touch challenging is a nice way to use your mobility. So I think anyone who starts a mobility journey, as you start to get a little better, you're just going to start utilizing it. And yeah, so a resting squat is a perfect example of that. Essentially what that is doing over time is it is just developing better lower body mobility. Your hips are in nice deep flexion, knees are in nice deep flexion, your ankles are in dorsiflexion. And when you first start that, it's freaking hard. It's hard to sit in a squat.
It doesn't sound hard, but it once you get past that minute and a half mark, you're like, holy crap.
Thighs are shaking, your tibialis anterior, that muscle in the front of your shin is completely exhausted. Yeah. So
well, I'm going to interject here and give a little shout to the ladies especially. So I've had multiple conversations with women lately about tight hips, especially. I don't have any children, but after you've had children, it is fantastic for your hips. Ladies, I would suggest sitting in a squat. Truly.
Yeah, it's a great way. I mean, if we do a big bike ride or something, the next day, it's so nice in the morning to just hang out in there for 2 to 3 minutes. It's an odd thing because you'll eventually get to a breaking point, and yes, you feel like you're really taxing and exhausting muscles. But you stand up, and because you've been working muscles in these deep ranges, you stand up and you just instantly feel more mobile. Like you feel like you've tapped into that end range muscle potential, and you stand up and you just feel more mobile. It's tough for people to start that because you might see me do it or some other mobility practitioner who has a pretty nice resting squat, and then you go to try to do it and you can barely get past 90 degrees. And your heels are elevated and you're hanging on to something and you don't even last 30 seconds. That is what it is. It's build on that 30 seconds. And over time, don't hang on to something quite as hard. Over time, lower the heels. The body will change if you give it 100%. The stimulus. It really, really will. So something like sitting in a squat is that is a nice piece of low-hanging fruit if you want to start a mobility journey of anyone can find time to accumulate, not do it all in one go, accumulate 5 minutes sitting in a squat. It's not that hard.
Speaking of low-hanging fruit, let's talk about hanging.
Yeah, very similar to, so if the squat is this low-hanging fruit for the lower body, hanging is the same for the upper body. It does require a bar of some sort, but I mean, doorway pull-up bars, any sort of simple pull-up bar is so easy to have in the house. And if you don't have that, just spending time hanging onto your door frame and letting your body sink down, and so putting a good bit of weight into your hands, you're going to get a nice stretch that way. But that hanging truly is, I don't really like using this word, but is a game changer for office workers. If you're someone, so is the squat, but if you're someone who you're starting to maybe struggle with your posture, and the thought of a 20-minute, 3-day-a-week mobility routine just sounds overwhelming to you, put a pull-up bar in your office. Over the course of a working day, accumulate 2, maybe 3 minutes of hanging, and it's going to do wonders for your upper body mobility. And I would say, if that seems like it's going to be too challenging for your upper body, be mindful of how you start. So, you can start with a foot on the ground. The goal is to just have the shoulders fully overhead as best you can and apply as much weight to it as possible. So if you're starting with 1 foot on the ground, just kind of self-regulate how much weight you're putting on that foot. You want to be able to hold a position for at least maybe 30 seconds before you take that foot all the way off, because your shoulders might freak out a little bit if you can't hold it for 30 seconds. But accumulate 2 to 3 minutes over the course of an 8 to 9 hour workday. That is, anyone has time for that. There's no excuse.
So moving on, kind of pivoting just a hair here, because I know this has changed with you over the years, that at least since I've known you, is would you combine mobility with strength work? Because I know you've gone through different phases of volume of strength work you've actually done versus when you were 100% mobility. So what would you say to that now?
So I personally would not combine them if it was my practice, just because I think you get way more. I think when you put too much into a session, regardless if it's strength, mobility, endurance, something is going to suffer.
Yeah.
And, as we were talking earlier, like there's so many nuances to mobility work. If you're saying, all right, I'm going to go do some heavy squats and then I'm going to do this thoracic spine rotation drill. At some point, maybe early in the session when you got as much energy, you might be paying a lot of attention to detail, but for most people, that's going to start to dwindle as you go on. So if you're time crunched, I totally get it. It's totally fine and appropriate to combine them. I actually do that on some of my programs on my app just because, I want to touch every lifestyle. So if you are a time crunch person, it's appropriate, but to the best of your ability, go into a session knowing I get out what I put in. Yeah. So if you're half-assing these mobility drills and at the end of 8 weeks, you're not satisfied with the progress, look back on how hard you worked within those mobility drills. If you have the time, it'd be better to just do strength, cut that session short by 15 minutes, whatever it is, and try to do the mobility at another time.
Well, and I will tell you, like, if you think that you're going to lose any strength when you practice mobility, you are wrong.
Yeah.
It will kick your ass, truly. I could not believe the impact it had on my body when I felt like I almost felt like I wasn't working that hard, but you feel the benefits of it. Yeah. So you're not losing strength. So to modify your workouts or your training programs to incorporate a mobility or 2-day and eliminate some of your strength work is not going to hurt you. It's
Absolutely
only going
not.
to better.
Yeah.
I mean, I've noticed even range of motion has been a game changer, especially with squatting. Some of the bigger lifts have improved greatly because of adding some mobility in there. So,
yeah, I mean, my lifts, when I started I think I touched on this on episode 1 a little bit. When I started, the tip of the iceberg, getting into mobility, I was really into squatting and deadlifting, and my numbers for that went up very quickly, and my legs just got more jacked. When you're training muscles through a greater range, you're stimulating more muscle. You're gonna get stronger and you're gonna get bigger. That's if you want that to happen. If you're training appropriately for those stimuluses as well.
Yeah, and if you don't mind me asking, I know we've had conversations about this, but especially, I feel like mobility is not present enough in athletes. Because of just for example, what you said, I just don't think it has enough of a presence that people could.
It's a tough sell because I think when it is programmed, I'm no expert on athlete strength and conditioning, but it's from what I know about it, it's kind of what we were just talking about. Do you pair it with strength work? A lot of times, at the college level, that's kind of probably what you have to do. Yeah. At the elite professional level, if the professional wants to take it upon themselves to have a mobility routine, they could probably do it. But I say general, even though it is elite strength and conditioning, it's tough to sell that as a, hey, here's your homework, or hey, come back and let's do this mobility session. Yeah. So it's definitely being done there, but I think it's done with the strength work. So it's how much effort is given in, who's the practitioner that's teaching it. Is it, not all strength and conditioning coaches, they're probably incredible at strength work, incredible at conditioning work. But we keep coming back to this. There's a lot of nuances when it comes to mobility work, and they might not have that specialty.
Well, and speaking of that, you talk about higher level stuff. You are executing higher level mobility, and that definitely takes more time, more practice, more dedication to it. So what does a session of higher level mobility look like?
So front split, middle split, back bridge.
Yes.
So that
was a long time coming. I watched him. God, it was the tiniest little changes over weeks and weeks and weeks.
Yeah, that's once you start working on those things, you're hooked. But typically those sessions, in a perfect world, you're doing a front split session by itself. You're doing a middle split session by itself. You're doing a back bridge session by itself. Pancake. There's overlaps in some of them, like front split and back bridge. There's a lot of hip extension work. So, you can combine the two. As I said, I do that.
Yeah.
I do that now. But if you're kind of just starting that journey of skill acquisition in the mobility field, working on the front split, working on the middle split, it's best if you have them as standalone sessions. And a typical session is probably going to be 45, 50 minutes. And it's probably going to be 3, maybe 4 movements that you'll do 4, possibly up to 5 sets of those movements. And it ends up being a decent amount of resting, just because the later movement is going to be your best version of that drill. So, take the front split, for example. The first couple drills are going to be a hamstring drill and a hip flexor drill. I might throw in 2 hip flexor drills for some people just because that's typically more notoriously tight. And then the final drill, you're working on some version of the front split. And that drill, whatever it is, a front split isometric hold, maybe a eccentric slide where you're just sliding into your deepest front split and holding. That drill should be, if done correctly, unbelievably exhausting to the point where you need to chill for like at least 60 to 90 seconds, probably maybe even more, before you do another attempt. So, and that's typical across the board for all these higher level, maybe not so much back bridge, but the splits, front and middle, pancake, you get into that stuff and you're going to rest a lot. But in general, for all these higher level things, it's you break down the movement. So for the back bridge, we work on shoulder flexion, thoracic spine extension, hip extension, even wrist extension. In some capacity, you do drills for all those things, and then you bring it back together and do the best version of a drill, or the correct scalable version of a drill of a bridge that you can do.
So that one mobility exercise, whatever you want to call it, that one little piece actually does work multiple things. This is not going and doing a back bridge for an hour. It is very calculated.
Yeah, it's 4 sets of
Right.
shoulder flexion stuff. It's 3 to 4 sets of hip flexor stuff. It's 3 to 4 sets of thoracic spine specific stuff. Mm-hmm. And then it's probably 4 or 5 sets of a back bridge version you can do pretty well, basically.
So speaking of that, you can hear there are layers to this, obviously. Yeah. Lots of layers. So because of that, what would you recommend if someone were to start their mobility practice as what is the max mobility movement goals you would give someone or tell someone to focus on? Because it is a very calculated, very buildable practice.
So if you're a generalist, if you're just coming into the space of, I want this to complement my strength work, mm-hmm. A nice goal is I want a better resting squat position because that's going to translate really well to CrossFit, and I want a better overhead position. You're working on every joint in the lower body, and you work on thoracic spine extension and shoulder flexion. That's 2 goals is great. If you get into, and for the generalist, 2 goals is great. So maybe you're even someone who's really into yoga and you just want to get better at downward facing dog or another yoga position. Those 2 goals, great. If you're someone who wants to get into the higher level skill stuff like front splits, back mm-hmm. bridge, middle split, 2 is probably ideal. You could maybe do 3 if you have the time to commit. Because as I said, those sessions are going to take you probably about 45 minutes. And you'd be doing them once, maybe twice a week, depending on where you are in your journey. It's actually interesting on those higher level stuff. As you get better at it, you actually do them less often.
Right. And
the reason is once you start to get close to max and range, like the middle split, for example, is you're stretching your adductors to the max. It's so obvious doing it myself and talking with other practitioners that what that stimulus is just so impactful on the body. You have to recover for 5, 6, maybe even 7 days before you need to do it again. But resting that much creates the change and you jump back in it. So for some people that ends up being frustrating. I get this question a lot is, hey, I see this front split program is only programmed twice a day. Can I do it 4 times or twice a week? Can I do it 4 times a week, 5 times a week? And my response is always, you're not working hard enough.
Don't rush the process.
It's you're not working hard enough, because if you're working hard enough, you're going to be sore and tight, and you're going to be, the last thing you're going to want to do is jump into that front split session the next day. And and if you do, you're just going to end up overtraining. I've been there myself, and it's overtraining for someone who's starting. Don't worry about that when it comes to mobility. But once you do get deep into it, that is something to be aware of.
So I asked you how many mobility drills to focus on. I also want to ask you, so if you are a beginner who has, what would you say on average is the amount of time that you say people reach out and they say, I have X amount of time? What is the average across the board time that people are telling you they have? 30 minutes?
Yeah, I think when they're coming to me for mobility specific stuff, I have 4 days a week for, 30 to 45 minutes. I would say if someone is coming to me for private training, they're probably they're probably ready to commit the time more so than maybe someone who just wants it as a complimentary piece. But talking to users on my app and just general discussion with people, this 3 days a week of 20 minutes is probably the sweet spot that seems doable for most people.
Well, and what I was going to tell you is when they ask you those questions and about the app, where do you direct them? Where would you tell them to start from the actual mobility drills?
It depends on what they want to get better at. I mean,
so you wouldn't say there's a general direction you send them if they're like, honestly, I don't even know what I want to work on. I just want to start.
They just want to move better. Yeah. I mean, we have general mobility on the app, and it's for the lower body, it's hip heavy. It's a lot of hip stuff. And the reason is the hip is the most mobile joint in the lower body. Right. You make change in your hips, you're going to feel it. Your knee's going to move better. Your ankle's going to move better. Your low back's going to move better. Being able to disassociate the ball of the femur from the pelvis is huge for people moving better and having less back pain. So, if you're someone who's just going to, we were talking about this earlier, just grab a couple moves they see on Instagram. Let's say you're going to go grab 4 movements that you think are challenging for you. Go grab 2 hip drills, a spine drill, and a shoulder drill.
There you go.
And do that 3 days a week. 20 minutes, like consistently pay attention to how it's executed correctly and be honest with yourself that you're executing it to the best of your ability. You're going to make some awesome change. Like that is an easy roadmap to change.
Perfect. Well, let's take it back to what maybe is more familiar language to our listeners that aren't familiar with mobility. And let's talk about your thoughts on passive stretching.
So passive stretch, I for years hated and bashed on passive stretching. And the reason was, we talked about this in episode 1 too, is that was my only, before I got into my own mobility journey, passive stretching was my only knowledge of what stretching was. And I tried it a little bit here and there, and it didn't work for me. Right. Because I was trying to use it to make significant mobility improvements, like a better squat, being able to touch my toes. But I've actually kind of done a 180 on static stretching, and I really like it a lot. I like it a lot for 2 reasons. One is, as I said earlier, I like to just spend time on the floor. Mm-hmm. And I'll sit at my computer sitting on the floor, and I'll just sit in a nice straddle, and I'll lean forward a little bit to put a little stretch on there. And so static stretching snuck into the day, I think, is awesome. But I really, really love it for recovery. Like
let's walk them through our 7-minute routine at night.
Yeah. So since biking a lot more, anyone who's an endurance athlete, that feeling of you're just kind of smoked at the end of the day. Legs are pumped. Like you can tell the
stairs are intimidating.
Yeah. You can tell you've really pumped your muscles. You've worked a lot of stuff, and you feel just worked at the end of the day. Static stretching, we do a 7-position routine. 2, it's actually just 4 stretches. 2 are single-sided for a total of 7 minutes, 1 minute each. And I only picked these stretches. I picked them because, they felt like they were hitting spots that I was tight in. But I could also read my Kindle. Like that was like, I was like,
Red light and Kindle.
Yeah, I was like, I want something that I know I'm going to do, and I know I'm going to do it if I can still read my Kindle. Yeah. And so it's, for recovery, it's awesome. Like we were talking about this the other day. I'd say once every 10 days, for whatever reason, we stayed up too late.
We were too tired.
And we just got upstairs to our bedroom, and we were like, I'm just going to go to bed.
I felt it.
And you feel it the next day. You're just like, and we woke up and immediately said it. We were like, dang, we would have felt better if we stretched. Yeah. And it's not that we're feeling bad, but it's just, you've done it enough now to know that doing this before I go to bed, I'm going to feel better.
Little baby steps of progress. I mean, even just those 7 minutes of like, guys, this is not like stretching that's going to make you sweat. This is the basics.
Totally.
But it's a great way to wind down. We turn the red light on. We read. I try and start conversations with him, and he shuts me up.
I'm reading,
so.
yeah. That's why I picked the stretches, so I can read. And the stretches are, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're probably a 6. Like, could I take it further and stretch harder? Yeah. But to me, the point of the stretch is let me calm my nervous system down.
Yeah.
Because chances are I've upregulated sympathetic nervous system all day, fight or flight. And I think the main reason this feels so good and is so beneficial is it jump starts getting into your parasympathetic nervous system before you go to bed. So your recovery is expedited. You're already right into it. That's at least what it feels like is happening.
Sure. So I have 3 questions for you to wrap things up.
Okay. Rapid fire?
Regarding specific drills.
Okay.
So 1, what was the most frustrating drill to master?
Probably.
And why?
Are we talking like front split, middle split, or are we talking just a drill?
Some of that, some of like front split, middle split, back bridge.
Of that stuff, the middle split for sure.
And why?
I think it's just that movement more than others. It does, like, the orientation, your anatomy of your pelvis does play a role at some point. So, when you do get close to balls to the floor, as they say, every tiny millimeter of progress just takes a lot of time, and it's tougher to see progress with that than it is with the other stuff.
And he had me doing some of those drills. Imagine that's when you hold something and then the timer goes off, but you're like, I'm stuck.
Yeah.
And it burns. Number 2, I was going to ask you, what was your favorite one? Like, what was your favorite move of everything?
This is like a combo mobility strength drill, but the dragon squat.
Oh yeah, that was a good one.
That was definitely like a movement where before I started mobility at all, I couldn't even fathom doing that, much less fathom seeing anyone else do it. And I mean, that was probably, to do it from the floor was probably a solid 3-year journey of slowly tacking away at it. So it's, that was just a cool one.
And then this might be the same one, but maybe not. Which one were you most proud of, or like stoked to, you're like, I got this one, and that one just made you, I don't know, you're like, I've made it in mobility now?
Honestly, probably one from a long time ago was the Cossack squat.
Yeah.
Like, being able to get up and down off the floor like that was awesome. Because I remember seeing someone do it. Like, I don't remember, it might have been like even pre-Instagram videos, but I was deep in a rabbit hole of a blog post or something, and I saw someone do it, and I was like, oh my gosh, how did they? And then I'd go try to do the move, and of course that's not the fastest way to get anywhere. And just remembering that, and then now being able to do it, that was like, once I did that, it was like, all right, it's on. Yeah. So.
Well, as y'all heard throughout this episode, mobility is a very loaded practice that, like, I honestly didn't even realize just how expansive the practice as a whole is. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to this guy, The Movement Journey.
Yeah, send me a DM. I mean, and again, at the easiest level, find 4 movements are going to have an impact on you. Do them really freaking well for 8, maybe 12 weeks. Get really good at doing those. And you're going to make progress. And we have the Movement Journey app too.
Yep.
If anyone wants to take it a little further, have a little more structured training. But feel free to shoot me a message.
Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate ratings, 5 stars only. But no, please be sure to subscribe. We look forward to diving into episode 4 with you. But thank you for spending your time with us tonight, afternoon, whenever you're listening.
Thanks, guys.